So this week, our podcast is going to be on the novel The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This book is set in a dystopian-type society where the birth rates have severely dropped and women are forced into several roles, handmaids being the ones who are still fertile. The society is known as the Republic of Gilead. The story follows the tale of Offred, her name derived from the male name Fred, as all handmaids' names are, and her experiences in and private rebellion against the Gilead Republic. Revealed at the end to have been recorded through several audio tapes, which were later found by researchers who compiled them into the text and named it The Handmaid's Tale.
Handmaids are forbidden to use their names and must echo the male or master whom they serve. Today we're going to explore the societal, cultural, and political significance that The Handmaid's Tale has today.
Okay, so today on our podcast we have a special guest, the scholar who co-transcribed his discoveries into what we know as The Handmaid's Tale, Professor James Darcy Piexoto.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So, can you provide us some background as to the discovery of The Handmaid's Tale?
Of course. You see, The Handmaid's Tale was actually a title provided by Professor Wade. The original incarnation was approximately 30 cassettes, found within an army footlocker. It was found in what was the city of Bangor, the state of Maine, prior to the founding of the Gileadian regime. The tapes had various pieces of spoken word along with music. The words were determined all to be from the same woman, while the music was thought banned during that period, not particular to her interests. The tape had no set order, and it was up to me and Professor Wade to piece together a complete transcript, which we now dub The Handmaid's Tale.
So, the Gileadian regime would be where The Handmaid's Tale took place. So, Professor, I just want to ask, what do you think of the methods of the Gileadian regime? Do you approve of them? Do you disapprove?
Well, to say I'd be indifferent to the matter of polygamy, forced wives, or the oppression of opposite sex would be quite false. Yet one is reminded of the regime's state of decline. Plummeting Caucasian birth rates were present, not exclusive to the Gileadian regime, but most of northern Caucasian societies at the time. This crisis could have been one of many origin, discounting the widespread birth control methods in the pre-Gileadian period. This era was home to many of the diseases such as R-strain syphilis and AIDS, eliminating many children having populace. This was also the time of heavy pollution, nuclear plants and accidents and shutdowns, leakage from bio and chemical weapons, rampant toxic waste disposal, and etc. All of these heavily increased the chances of stillbirth as well as mutations and genetic deformities. Not to mention the Gileadian regime were not the ones to react. Romania banned all birth control, as well as having compulsory pregnancy tests and linking promotion and wage increase with fertility.
Though the regime collapsed, do you think, in your opinion, does it still have influence? Does it still linger in our society today?
Well, with this I have to consider what lingering influence defines. If it be the oppression of women, then just as prevalent since before the Gileadian era. Our natural discrimination against those of difference, however slight, is only combated with level heads and reasonable minds, something sadly not widely present in times of war. As for the theocracy of the Gileadian era, it is certainly present, as today not only texts of worship, but that of regulation and order can be twisted by those who wish, for one determined enough to find any reason within that written text. It would be the restriction control over childbearing, whether encouraged or discouraged, that is an issue driven by circumstance. Former regards of a body needs for new generations, determined by its state and situation. If circumstances such as that of the Gileadian regime, one may be forced to extremes they have once resorted to.
Now, then, please tell me, was there anything within The Handmaid's Tale that was, if not significant, at least interesting to you?
Well, an event I do find interesting was early on during one of Offred's shopping trips. We heard her describe bodies hanging from the outer walls, white cloth over their heads. The reason for that was clear. Though perhaps not the most remarkable scare tactic employed, it reminded me of medieval times, when traitors would be displayed on the stake or in cages. This, amongst many other things, reminded me of the saying, history runs in cycles, such as the underground femroad being an obvious parallel to the underground railroad of the times of slavery, or not only in location, but sharing the ideals of those who are oppressed will always gain allies. Or what if the countries decline due to disease and their fall at the hands of neglecting science? The reason many before it fell. I guess the more the world changes, the more it stays the same.
So speaking of history, actually, I have a question for you. Who writes history?
Who writes history, you ask? Well, I presume everyone has heard the common phrase, history is written by the victors, saying only those who stand at the top will make their stories known. Yet, after what we have seen, this isn't true, is it? History is written by far more than those who took center stage. As a scholar, my job, in a sense, is to look past that which is displayed on a pedestal and open, to look in the nooks and crannies for hidden nuggets of golden truth. The one may encounter many that are mere gilded lies. A single piece could be that which uncovers a vault to a world long past, and find ourselves better for it. The victors? No. History is written by anyone who has the courage to tell their stories.
And thank you so much, Professor Piexoto. That does conclude our interview. We are so thankful to have had the opportunity to speak with you today. So let's move on to our next section. So we just had the opportunity to listen to an interview with Professor Piexoto, who is introduced in the epilogue of the book. In your opinion, did the epilogue serve as like a plot point, something to further the reader's understanding, or was it to hit Atwood's point home? I think personally that it was definitely to hit Atwood's point home, just because of the nature, I guess, of the epilogue, where, you know, we learned that this was a bunch of transcripts from, you know, these reels of tape. So they were transcribed by two men, and these two men ended up naming their book The Handmaid's Tale. The Handmaid's Tale being, like, you know, a crude sort of play on word, like, about, you know, I don't want to say it. But I just think that, you know, with a story like this, that's extremely inappropriate to call it The Handmaid's Tale. And, you know, considering two men, you know, transcribed it as well, and now it's two men talking about the experience questioning the experience that Offred recounted in these tapes and in this book, I think is pretty ironic, you know?
Yes, I would agree on that point. The two men that transcribed The Handmaid's Tale did indeed place Offred's story with importance, yet not without its faults. Regarding their studies in the epilogue, they treated the discovery of the identity of the general with great importance, but the life story of Offred was not mentioned quite as often, and not even discussed as farther as a few lines. It's displaying a sort of difference in treatment.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you think of, you know, the way they did treat Offred's story? Like, do you think that it was, I don't know, done justice in the way that they talked about it in the epilogue? Or why did you think that that's how they treated Offred, like, when they were talking about the book?
Well, from the book, the original intention of Professor Piexoto during that speech was to actually question the legitimacy of the Handmaid's Tale, showing that not only questioning the actuality of this life story, but also
Yeah, I think that it's really crazy that, you know, they were trying to, you know, sort of minimize Offred's experience or the credibility of her experience. They have, like, this entire book, like 300 tapes of audio recordings of this woman who is explaining all of these things that she went through in this society, you know, after she escaped. And, you know, they're kind of like, oh, like, it could be anything, you know, like, but then they find, like, I think it was like an email or something from one of those commanders, and they were like going ballistic about that. Like, it was the greatest thing. It was the greatest discovery. It was so like wonderful. It was like, this is history, but it's like one email versus 300 tapes. And I think honestly that answers the question that we asked Piexoto before about, does Gileadan society still have lingering impacts today? Like, the silencing or sort of the discrediting women is still happening, and they did it with that book, Okay, so what was your favorite or most like striking part of the book? Like, when you read it, it sort of elicited kind of a response, I guess.
When Offred was going on her shopping trip, and she saw the dead bodies on the wall, that kind of shifted the mood for me, I guess, to a completely different thing, because I don't know what it is, but I feel like I had this connection, like when you see dead bodies on the wall. I don't know if you guys ever heard of the term Alabama wind chime, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
When like they hang slaves on trees.
Yeah.
And they like hung dead bodies on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
That, I don't know what it is, but like it just reminded me of like this Alabama wind chime, I guess, because like it just, yeah, it's a pretty tough pill to swallow. I'll say that, but yeah, it was just striking for me.
A part that really struck me was the part where she was looking at her breakfast and there was an egg. And she was talking about how pleasure was an egg and how simple things can make some strange and different and terrifying situation like the one she was in seem more normal and acceptable.
Did you guys see any flashes of our present reality anywhere in this book?
Well, there was the thing that struck me after the book when I was reading about some of the new abortion laws regarding that.
Yeah.
That did strike me as something related to the book.
For me, I actually recently watched this documentary on the dairy industry. By the way, I'm not drinking milk anymore. So basically what they do is they have all of these cows, and animals only produce milk when they are pregnant or when they have given birth. Mm-hmm. So to get cow milk, they have to have recently had a calf to produce it. So what they do is they inseminate these cows on this thing that they call a rape rack. So they're like, it's called like that's something that they call it, like dairy farmers in the industry call it. So it's like a bunch of cows. There's like a big circle, and it's sort of like a fence, like a corral, I guess. And they're all turned like facing inwards.
So they're tied up.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they like inseminate them, so impregnate them. So they wait until the cow is born, and then the second that it's born, it is torn away from its mother. Then the cow is now it's a dairy cow, So they'll take all of the milk that they can from this recently pregnant cow, and once they stop producing milk, they get her pregnant again, so that she can do it. The cycle it's an imminent cycle of just getting pregnant and giving birth, and then milk, pregnant, birth, milk. Like, it's crazy. Like, and that's exactly what they did with the handmaids. Like, you give birth once, and then okay, now we're done. Like, instead of the milk being the product, it's the children being the product. And the second the handmaids give birth, the baby is ripped out of their arms, and it's given to the wife. Like, that's it. They don't get to see their children. Like, they don't get to have that baby. So speaking of insemination, that's not the really bad transition. Gender-based violence was something Offred mentioned a few times throughout the story. For instance, when she was recounting her time at the education center for handmaids, the Red Center, Offred talked about how the aunts would tell them about how before Gilead, women were raped and murdered and abused, but now women are safe. The idea was essentially you may not like being a handmaid, but consider all the alternatives, like how it used to be. First of all, since this book was published in the 80s, do you think that that kind of gender-based violence against women still exists?
Yeah, it definitely still exists. It might be less so now, but...
Let's move on to today. Actually, about 3 weeks ago now, Gwyneth, you mentioned it earlier. Yeah, the Alabama abortion bills. Oh boy. What do you guys know about them right now? Like anything you know at all?
Well, it's not only happening in Alabama, right?
Yeah, they're trying to spread it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Ohio is one of them.
You mentioned the other day that they're trying to do it in Georgia as well.
Yes.
Yeah, like the state, right?
Yes.
Okay, because there's a country named Georgia. Well, what I know about it is that I guess they're trying to ban abortion, I think. Their goal is to make it illegal.
Yeah.
Well, what I don't know is, what was the incentive for this bill? Was it public outcry, or was it a sort of thing?
I'm not entirely sure where it came from, but it's called the Heartbeat Bill. So it's, basically where that comes from is, it says that, there's a heartbeat after 6 weeks of pregnancy. So that's why they call it the Heartbeat Bill, because in this bill it says that abortions are illegal at and past 6 weeks of pregnancy. So, because you know how they can tell about how long you've been pregnant. So if you're at 6 weeks or you're past, you can't have an abortion. And the problem with that is, most women don't know that they're pregnant until 6 or 7 weeks.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Now I understand.
Some people might not even know they're pregnant and not have the chance to
Even
get
know.
rid of it if they don't want it. Stuck with something they don't want.
Actually, under these laws, doctors can be punished with up to 99 years in prison for providing an abortion at or past 6 weeks.
Which is an absurd amount of time. That's your entire life.
Yeah, that's a life sentence. That's a life sentence. Just say it's a life sentence. Yeah, and what's really funny is that, also in this bill, there's no exceptions for rape and incest. So, if the child is a product of rape or incest, you're not allowed to get an abortion. You have to carry it to term if it's past 6 weeks. And if a woman goes to another state to try to get an abortion and they find out about it, the government finds out about it, she can be in prison up to 10 years. That is the 99-year sentence. I saw this, someone said this on Twitter, that is longer than the sentence you get for rape.
Saw that as well.
Yeah.
You're basically going to be punished more for being raped than actual.
So you said that if a woman, right, is pregnant and she...
I'm afraid that, they'll introduce something with a less harsh sort of penalty or something that's less restrictive. And, people will be like, oh, that's so much better. It's kind of like when you're trying to manipulate someone, you ask them to do a really big favor. And then when they say no, then you ask them a little favor, and then they're like, yeah, of course.
Yeah, and it's connected, right? For example, what you're talking about, how it's up to 6 weeks, they might push it to 2 months or something like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Even more time.
There's actually a quote that I don't think it was Gloria Steinem, but it might have been. But Gloria Steinem, she was one of the leaders of second wave feminism in the 60s. She said, but somebody said at the very least that if men could get pregnant, abortion would be as easy as buying cough medicine. What do you think about that?
Cough medicine.
It would be easily accessible. Same with birth control. Birth control as well.
I was about to cut you off and say chocolate bar or something. But, yeah. What I think about it?
Pardon? Yeah, what do you think about it?
Okay. basically, since in this society, men have more power, right? Obviously, and especially if they're Caucasian or white, they have more power. And what I think of it.
Yeah. Like, do you agree with it?
I agree with it. Yeah, for sure. Because in this society, like for the abortion laws, the people who made the abortion laws were all white males, right?
Yeah.
And not a single female. And even if you still look at political parties, political parties, yes, and you see photos of like the NDP party or the
Republicans. GOP.
Yeah.
Whoa.
They're still it's still dominated by males.
Yeah.
Even though there's like one or two women, there's still a lot of males. It's not equal.
This concludes our discussion of The Handmaid's Tale and its significance to our modern world. I think it has some interesting ideas and concepts which are still relevant today, even years after it was published. Overall, this was a very interesting and thoughtful novel, and I certainly enjoyed it, and I assume everyone else did as well. So, anyways, that's all for our podcast. See everyone next week.
And that actually brings me to another question. Should men make laws about abortion and birth control?
I don't think they should do it without also having women's opinions, because it's not their body. They've never had to go through pregnancy or anything. They don't know what it's like. They don't have the point of view from people who have actually gone through this or know that their bodies can do this.
That being said, there can also be males with expertise in like areas of pregnancy that might provide some more insight than say a common civilian. But I'm not saying that all men can make use of the laws. I'm saying those with enough qualifications, with a proper ability to make laws, should do so. It's less about the actual act of gender and more about their talent and actual ability to make proper laws.
And what gets me mad the most is when like what's his name again? I think Jagmeet Singh, right?
Yes.
He's a leader of the
Well, he's Minister of Defenses right now, I think.
He is?
I think so,
No,
yeah.
He's I swear he's a political
Yeah, he is. But
Anyways, what I'm trying to say, even though he's a political party leader, I think it's NDP he's a leader of. As you guys know, he is Sikh, right? So he's Indian. I think I seen a photo of his political party, and it's just him. He's the only Indian person in the party. The rest are white people. I'm sorry to say it. It gets me mad sometimes when they say, "Oh, culturally diverse," and they add one like person who isn't white.
One token ethnic person.
And like, oh, we're culturally. No, you're not.
And that's the same thing in just media in general.
And I feel like if you're just doing it for the culturally diverse thing, I feel like it's not
just to
it's
make
not
people
really,
happy.
It's not really getting the message across, because the thing about this is that positions like these shouldn't be determined by the fact that you being culturally diverse is a factor. It should be determined by whether they're qualified for the position.
This concludes our discussion of The Handmaid's Tale and its significance to our modern world. I think it has some interesting ideas and concepts which are still relevant today, even years after it was published. Overall, this was a very interesting and thoughtful novel, and I certainly enjoyed it, and I assume everyone else did as well. So, anyways, that's all for our podcast. See everyone next week.